Welcome to Daily Drive for Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, a new role for Ram Chief Tim Kuniskis. FBI data shows that cargo theft is on the rise. And Infiniti rolls out a new plan to reward dealers. Plus, Phil Koopman explains how the Trump administration is working to clear the path for self-driving cars.
The federal administration is making it very clear that they want to encourage, accelerate, and make it easy to put robotaxi technology on public roads.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up with the auto industry.
Stellantis has appointed Ram brand CEO Tim Kuniskis as head of American brands, as well as North America marketing and retail strategy. Stellantis also is resurrecting its street and racing technology performance division, which Kuniskis will lead. The unit was part of Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, but then was disbanded after FCA merged with PSA Group in 2021. Stellantis said Kuniskis will retain his position as Ram CEO. In fact, each of the current brand CEOs will continue driving their respective brands. Kuniskis is popular among dealers and has a knack for building excitement around brands. Stellantis National Dealer Council Chairman Michael Bettenhausen has called Kuniskis a sales and marketing genius. He will report to CEO Antonio Filosa.
Thefts of autos and auto parts while in commercial freight shipment, called cargo theft, ballooned during the pandemic and isn't slowing down. That's according to an Automotive News analysis of FBI data from 2012 to 2023, the most recent available. For example, there were 96 reported cargo thefts of vehicles or parts in 2013 and more than 1,000 a year from 2020 through 2023. At least 495 thefts in the data involved vehicles and parts stolen from dealerships, and at least 162 were at manufacturing sites. The Bureau collects the information from law enforcement agencies across the country. In 2023, there were 1,360 cargo thefts involving parts and vehicles valued at more than $35 million. Police recovered about half that much, $16 million worth, that year.
U.S. new car and light truck sales fell 4.2% in June, marking the first month this year the market has turned negative. That's according to Morgan Stanley analyst Adam Jonas. Stellantis continued to struggle for the eighth straight quarter, with April to June deliveries falling 10%. But the news was not all bad, as Jeep overcame a year-long skid and Ram's streak of 5 quarterly declines ended. Sales rose 1.1% at Jeep and 4.9% at Ram, as employee pricing deals appeared to draw more showroom traffic. Volume fell 42% for the Chrysler brand, 48% at Dodge, and 51% at Alfa Romeo, while rising 25% at Fiat. Industry-wide, sales were mixed, with new U.S. tariffs in effect since April 3rd appearing to be taking an early toll on some brands that rely more heavily on imported models. For example, Volkswagen brand sales fell 29% in the quarter, while premium sibling brand Audi dropped 19%.
With its retailers' profits at the lowest level in 15 years, Infiniti is revamping its dealer compensation plan to help stores jumpstart their bottom and top lines. Infiniti's Performance Plus plan started July 1st. Dealerships that reach 90% of their volume goal will be paid 0.5% of sticker prices minus shipping cost. The payment doubles to 1% when they meet the full target, and doubles again to 2% if they exceed the target by 10%. Infiniti America's Vice President, Tiago Castro, told Automotive News that the plan prioritizes metrics that are foundational to profitability: retail sales and customer experience. Quote, "If you don't sell new vehicles, you don't have a service, F&I, or parts business." And those are today's headlines. So, Jamie, what are your thoughts on Tim Kuniskis taking over the U.S. brands at Stellantis?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. Kuniskis is a very popular sales executive, very seasoned, really has good relations with the dealers and a good feel for consumers. I had thought it was a good idea for Filosa to not name a new COO for North America, because he didn't really have a good fit. Kuniskis seemed like the best candidate, but he's really he has like no experience that I know of, with supplier relations or labor relations. And, so it's this kind of a move really gives him a bigger stage, but keeps him in the lanes where he's comfortable, where he has proven success, where he's really set up to succeed and not to have to learn on the job. So it seems like a, prudent move by Stellantis and Filosa, and we'll see how it turns out.
Gotcha. Coming up, how the Trump administration is working to clear the roads for robotaxis. That's next on Daily Drive.
Daily Drive listeners like you have access to the lowest price for Automotive News Congress 2025 on September 11th.
The event is where the industry's biggest players tackle its toughest challenges. Congress attendees don't just follow the industry, they lead it.
This year's featured speakers include Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Yusin Chung and General Motors CEO Mary Barra.
We are investing in America. We're creating jobs. That's creating IP in this country. And I think, the United States needs to lead in key technologies.
Join us to gain the insights and connections needed to steer your business through massive change.
To get the lowest price for the event, go to autonews.com/events, select Auto News Congress, and type in the discount code Daily Drive, one word, all caps. We'll see you in September in Detroit. Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. The Trump administration has stirred up a lot in the auto industry with tariff policies and also with de-emphasizing electric vehicles and cleaner transportation. But that's not all. It's also working to encourage deployment of cars and heavy trucks that are driven by computer systems rather than by humans. To help unpack the administration's efforts, our own Molly Boygan spoke with Philip Koopman, the longtime Carnegie Mellon professor who is now a technical consultant. Here's their conversation.
Let's start off at the sort of 30,000-foot view. How do you think the general approach is going to impact the rollout and adoption of robotaxis and autonomous vehicles?
Well, the federal administration is making it very clear that they want to encourage, accelerate, and make it easy to put robotaxi technology on public roads. And by extension, that's going to include robo-trucks as well.
From a technical perspective, why does it make a difference to sort of streamline the approvals process for some of these vehicles that would have had like a more, what the administration has positioned as a more cumbersome, more like a destructive to innovation kind of process in the past? Like, do you believe that will sort of speed up the adoption of these products?
Well, there are two issues here. In separating them is really important. The first issue is whether the software and the computer driver is going to be safe on public roads. And these regulations don't really address that, except for the proposal to preempt state regulations, which would make it basically no rules, that states are no longer allowed to regulate the safety of the drivers. From a different technical point of view, what you see is there's a valid concern that if you have a robotaxi with no steering wheel, you're able to meet some but not all of the federal motor vehicle safety standards. And that's not because they were designed to prohibit steering wheels. It's because the tests involve a steering wheel and it's sort of accidental. It'll say measure so many centimeters or inches from a steering wheel. And if you don't have a steering wheel, well, you're kind of stuck. The intent was not to require a steering wheel. It just, you can't run the test because it's not there. Now for airbags, the FMVSS 200 level series, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, has already fixed those. But they haven't done the others, the 100 series, the 400 series. So there are still some tests that you can't run if you don't have a steering wheel accidentally because you have to measure from steering wheels is the simple version. And the idea is you could always apply for an exemption, but you had to show that you had equivalent safety, wherever that means in your context. And historically, companies that want to put out robotaxis, the toaster vehicles with no steering wheel, those kind of things, had a lot of trouble going through that exemption process. I believe Nuro successfully did it, but Cruise had trouble. Other companies have had trouble with it. And so the idea is to make that process a lot easier, months instead of years, and more likely to say yes than say no. So that's really what the emphasis is on with these exemptions.
And yeah, you mentioned also the preempting of state regulations.
The notion of preempting regulations for AI can be put in the bigger context. There's a lot of AI stuff that has nothing to do with self-driving cars. But if it intentionally or unintentionally sweeps in things like robotaxis, that means that all the regulations that states have spent lots of time and effort setting up would suddenly be nullified, and it'd be basically open season. Anyone could do whatever they wanted. The risk here, the danger here, is the federal government says you're not allowed to regulate because we've got it. And then it takes them 5 years to do something. For those 5 years, there are no regulations for practical purposes. That's the big problem. There's another problem that's a little more nuanced, which is states have traditionally had the right to regulate driving behaviors. And to the extent that a preemption on AI regulation affects robotaxis, robotrucks, that could remove the existing state right to regulate driving behavior, which sounds problematic to me, but I'm not a constitutional scholar.
And when you talk about the potential for the limiting of states' regulatory abilities, the issue being if the federal government is delayed in implementing its own regulations, that there's this sort of Wild West period. Why has it been states so far that have been able to sort of create parameters for the robotaxi companies? I'm thinking about California where the CPUC, it felt like, was really sort of, leading the charge in approving or disapproving the institution of robotaxis at different times. Anyway, why have states sort of been taking that leadership role so far as opposed to the federal government?
Well, right now there's a dividing line for human drivers that the states control the driver and the federal government controls the equipment. And the issue you have is when the equipment becomes the driver, where do you draw that line? And we've seen attempts to encroach across the line in both directions. The U.S. government, NHTSA, issued a recall for rolling through stop signs. But if a human driver rolled through a stop sign, that'd be a state and local issue, not a federal issue. And states are grappling with how do you regulate the fact there's a computer in this car, which is a piece of hardware. And so that line is kind of fuzzy. What's happening now, California is a good example of a state that is spending more effort than most to regulate. And what they're doing is they have a couple things. They've preempted localities. So the city of San Francisco gets no say at all. And due to a quirk of California law, not because the law was written this way, but because how the law ends up describing a driver in that particular state, they're not allowed to give tickets for moving violations to robotaxis either. Although in Texas, they can give tickets. So it's a real nuanced thing there. So that leaves the state. And what the state does is they have the California Department of Motor Vehicles who issues permits for operation. And then they have California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC. CPUC has very clearly distanced itself from the issue of driving safety. They license taxis. So a CPUC license just says, yeah, you can transport passengers. But DMV are the ones who issue the permit to operate on roads. So as long as you're not charging for passengers, CPUC has nothing to say. Now, where that gets into trouble is if DMV wanted to require a particular piece of equipment, let's say they wanted to say, oh, you have to have LiDAR. Then someone might say, well, that's equipment, so that's federal government. And if the government said, well, you're not allowed to roll through stop signs, someone might say, well, that's a state thing. And so that's where it gets kind of squishy. I personally would draw the line at the federal government should regulate the ability to conform to driving rules, but the state should get the say on which driving rules it needs to conform to and enforce when it fails to do so. So if a robotaxi blows through a stop sign, the state should have every right to take away its license if that's what they want to do.
Molly Boygan is a staff reporter here at Automotive News. Philip Koopman was a longtime Carnegie Mellon professor. He is now a technical consultant. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Vince Bond Jr., Molly Boygan, David Phillips, and Urvash Kakaria for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on robotaxis, executive leadership, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for my interview with Bill Berman, CEO of Pinewood Technologies Group, about how he's working with his biggest shareholder, Lithium Motors.
We're ecstatic about it. Our shareholder base think it's the right thing to do, and we're just excited about taking the product to North America.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.